time for another round of Brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand with your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
Welcome back to another round of Brandy. Today we're diving into the intricacy of social psychology and the phenomenon of us versus them, or we versus they.
When it comes to brands, it's like, what side of the proverbial fence are you, or aisle, or anything else? We always, as mankind, we like, there's safety in numbers, right? There's stigmas, social stigmas about your group, your tribe, there's so many terms we use nowadays for our little communities, our teams, yeah. But it goes back to like the rivalries, the us for them. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like sports teams, right? If you live in California and you're a baseball fan, A's, but they're no longer in Oakland. But for around here, for most people, it's like, are you a Giants fan or are you a Dodgers fan?
This is actually a great Seinfeld moment, is that Jerry had a stand-up where he's like, teams are so funny where you'll have one guy and he's wearing a colored jersey. It's your favorite team. And you're going, oh, I love him. He's so great. Look at him. Oh, wow. And then he switches teams. He gets traded. Yeah. And then just because he changes his shirt color is that now you're like, oh, boo him. I hate him.
He's an a-hole.
He's and he's like, why do we do this? And I was like, that was so. And that was like Jerry Seinfeld in like the early 90s. He was doing a stand-up.
One of the greatest 20th century philosophers of our time.
He's still going. He still has some great. Like when you just zoom out, take a pause, zoom out, and look at all these kind of categories in your life, whether it's products or brands you like, or the car you drive, or your favorite sports team, or your political opinions. Everything breaks down to these teams and these kind of social assignments and groups where we really go, okay, just because I'm subscribing to team X or team blue or team whatever, I'm part of this group, so therefore everyone else is part of this other group. And for some reason, they've really dove into this within social psychology. Back in the 60s, they were doing studies with children and even adults and college kids of going, okay, how does this happen where once you put someone in a group, they start having preference and favoring those within their group, they're like peers at that moment, even though they don't know these people before, they start really favoring them, and then also holding things against the other team. And it's again been proven over and over and over. But then when you go, okay, how does this apply to brands? Is that we do the same thing, whether that's you wear Nikes versus Adidas or whatever it could be. It's like there's going back what like Seth Godin wrote about some years ago, but with like tribes and tribalism, and that humans are innately programmed to have these tribes and to assign ourselves to really social networks in a sense.
If you're in the ag or country culture, right, like, and you have everyone has pickups because you're hauling your horse trailers or your whatever it is, right, the trailer truck movement, it's like Ford or Chevy, right, and the Bud or Coors, Coke, Pepsi.
It is really funny how this whole, this or that, A or B, we really reveal how much of our psychology we are really binary when we do go, it's either 1 or 0, it's either X or Y, and we hone in on these decisions because it's a very easy cognitive load for us to understand that and to be able to make decisions that way. It's either this or that. But in the same breath, it also limits our potential.
With the soda wars, you go out to eat somewhere, you're not given a choice. No. I've never been somewhere like, you're ordering your meal, right? And you're going, oh, I feel like a soda. And it's like, well, I'll take a Coke. Oh, well, we have Pepsi. In outdoor settings with eating establishments, you don't have a literally Coke versus Pepsi option. Yeah. It's only when you're in the store and you're actually buying it for home use do you go, do I want Coke or do I want Pepsi?
Right. And what's crazy about that is that reminds me is that Costco, for the first time ever, is going to have Coke product in its food court. Is that before Costco's always been Pepsi product, and really now they just inked a deal with Coke. Is that's going to be switching over? So it's a huge loss for Pepsi, but also Coke seems to fit the Costco vibe more for some reason. It's like both classic brands.
Interesting you say that. Like, why do you say that?
Well,
Like,
Coke's
what-
so classic, and it feels like
Okay, so are you a Coke guy?
nostalgic. I'm a Coke
and
guy.
so,
Yeah.
speaking into that right now,
Yeah.
this is our exact same point. You're automatically more of a proponent,
Right.
Right. Your logic brain is supporting your own internal argument that I like Coke better, therefore it makes. And you're a Costco guy, right? You shop at Costco, so it would. Of course, they should do that. This is, you know what I mean?
Because Coke, to me, I think Coke they have a deal with Disney. Coke and In-N-Out, that's always been a partnership.
Okay.
And now it makes sense to me that Coke and Costco, for some reason, those brands in my mind are all in this nostalgic, like American, like just wonderful companies that just are amazing. And all of those brands working together, I'm like, it makes sense. And Pepsi on the other
but
hand,
they're playing. But
they're playing into that. The
and
association is.
I'm
very,
glad you brought this up, Riley, because this is exactly what we're talking about. Is that psychology of socialism? I want to say socialism. That sounds crazy. So we're not talking about socialism, but social stigmas, because and as consumers with brands, and if we're talking about, you know, not brand wars, but just brand preferences, how brands immerse themselves in our personal lifestyle and frame us for other brands, the brands association, the perception of the brands, and how they align with our own personal narratives of who we are as people, as individuals, as consumers, or like you said, as tribes.
Yeah. Yep. And it's funny to me because I'm like, okay, what would Apple sell? If Apple sold soda, which brand would it be? My gut tells me it would be Coke. Apple and Coke makes sense to me. If Apple had a soda
Between
machine,
those two choices?
yeah. If they had to go, okay, these Apple stores now have soda fountains. What brand would they?
Okay, so what are you using as your gauge? Like, I don't know if I agree or not agree. I'm just like, I hadn't never thought about it until you literally just throw that out there, and I'm going, I don't like.
Well, I think Apple,
and why
Apple would associate themselves with Coke, and vice versa, because it's just like how Apple and Disney are hand in hand. You know, like they have that relationship. And Apple and Costco.
Okay, but here's the thing: is like I equate Apple, in my mind, Apple is an imaginative, innovative brand.
Yeah.
Okay, always has been.
Yep.
And yes, you and I both love Disney, but my association with Disney and Walt Disney particularly is Imagineering. It is innovation. It is very much. My brain is organizing Apple and Disney and putting them on the same side based on innovation.
Yeah.
I don't see Coke as innovative or imaginative. Now, granted, Coke is nostalgic, so I can equate Coke and Disney as on the purpose of nostalgia, right? Mm-hmm. But Apple has no context with nostalgia.
Well, I feel like Coke they did the custom drink fountain where it has the buttons and you push it. That was a big thing. And then they've done creative marketing where even like they had that Coke truck driving around where you go up and you press the button on it and a Coke would pop out. And they've always done things that
I don't really remember that.
Yeah, so they've done these interesting campaigns where they're pushing out for again, they're selling a commodity. So it's like they're doing these things. I think just brand wise, their respect.
Here's my thing. Here's my take on it. Like when Coke did that, I've always equated Coke on this like formula where to me there's something about the recipe and it's not tinkered and I'm not thinking about it, I'm just enjoying the taste. But when I can just one machine, it's like one outlet and it's just all these my brain started thinking about all the flavored tubes and it's all connecting and the tech behind it, that it lost its, I didn't think of it as a custom.
It's not very appetizing.
I know they were trying to go for customization and you want to mix and it was like a nice novelty, but to me it was almost that looking inside the package to really how it's made, and I didn't find that to be an attractive option.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm more of an RC cola. If I'm really looking at Cola Wars, I just like Royal Crown. Personally, I don't drink that soda. And every now and then, if I'm like at Albertsons and they've gotten the end cap, I can see that one little bottle, and I'll get that one just because every now and then, if I want it,
blow the dust off it.
No, actually, Royal, they're still contained.
They're still going. They're still going.
And that's a very old vintage, cola company too. But anyway,
and so with these brands, that you do have, like we're saying, you do usually have Ford versus Chevy, Coke versus Pepsi. You have like this two sides of the spectrum. But then there always is almost a byproduct of having that. Then you always have these third parties, whether it's Republican and Democrat, and then you have the Libertarian Party or these other parties that spin off from it that are just in the middle due to being in the middle. Like even Dr. Pepper in that aspect, where Dr. Pepper is independent compared to these other soda companies. And I know Dr. Pepper, I think, is actually the number 2 bestseller now. It has a very niche like audience.
Dr. Pepper's not independent, dude.
Well,
Dr. Pepper, no,
Keurig.
because Mr. Pibb is owned by Pepsi. Dr. Pepper is owned by Coke.
Nope. Keurig and Dr. Pepper are the same thing. Dr. Pepper is independent.
Wait, really?
Yeah. And so it's
because it's the same lineup. Because
they,
but when you go to a vending machine and they have their version of it's either Mr. Pibb or it's Dr. Pepper, and it's based on the parent lineup of the cola. And same thing with orange. Is it Fanta or is it Sunkist? And it's because those sodas are all in the same family by that parent company.
No, so Keurig and Dr. Pepper. That's why when you see the trucks, it's usually Dr. Pepper.
Really? No way.
I could be wrong, but let's see. Survey says, who owns Dr. Pepper? Currently, Dr. Pepper is owned by Keurig Dr. Pepper, a publicly traded company that produces and distributes various beverages, including, this is interesting, Dr. Pepper, Snapple, 7-Up, and Green Mountain Coffee. So that's why Keurig.
But I thought
that's interesting.
Snapple was owned by someone else. I thought when we were researching for last week's episode with the brand war, the big brand eaters, I thought I saw somewhere that's about Snapple who actually owns Snapple. But I guess okay. So Keurig, like as in like the coffee?
Yeah.
No way.
Dr.
Wow.
Pepper, 7-Up, Canada Dry, Crush, A&W, Sunkist, Squirt, Snapple.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Wow,
see, that's when we first recording these podcasts, sometimes and we just kind of feel like we're going to wing it. Sometimes we have moments like this where I'm like, wow, okay, I'm eating my words. I thought something and you
it's
proved me
kind of
wrong.
crazy that you can have like a third. Again, they're going against Pepsi and Coke, which are ginormous. Yeah. And Dr. Pepper, I believe it was last year, they actually came up as they passed up one of them as like the top moving soda, which is insane. But that also shows like the niche, the power of being so niche and focused on carbonated prune juice, and then having the audience who loves it. Which Dr. Pepper, I gotta say, sometimes I am in the mood for
I
Dr.
get where
Pepper.
people come from, but it's a good. Anyway.
It's good. I like it.
But we're not spending the whole time on this podcast talking about the soda wars. So the idea again, it's that idea of we get into these groups and communities, micro communities as consumers, right? And what other brands just naturally fall into those categories? I don't think it was intentional, but when Tesla all of a sudden became a political brand, right? And it's falling on one side of the aisle politically. We're passionate about very certain things. So when brands start entering those arenas, purposely or unintentionally, that can have a big impact on the brand and the groups that either support it or repel against it because it is in these other groups that we have firm associations with or against.
Right. Yeah, I have a theory on that, but I won't go into that right now.
Okay.
I might write about that. But so the social psychology of this, again, it goes back to like evolutionary biology where being in a group means protection. It means identity. It means being able to survive.
Safety.
Yeah, safety.
Safety in numbers.
All these benefits to it where we then have to view ourselves that way. We can't be independent. We can't be this, okay, we're out here as an island just floating by ourselves. So everything we do, we associate with kind of group think of going, okay, what does this mean? Because everything that we choose to do action-wise, that gives us, there's meaning behind that. And then that meaning is then projected on us. And so we go, what does that say about me? I chose to do that. I reacted this way. I responded this way. What does that mean about me? Right. And so, rationally you go, no, it's the other way around. We go, okay, who am I? And then you rationally pick your response and you maturely respond to the situation when no, that's not the case. Is that, you're in traffic, you have whatever road rage and you lash out a certain way. And then you reflect on it and go, I responded that way or I reacted that way.
Right.
What is that actually saying about me? And same thing with our purchases. We'll purchase something and then we go, oh, I chose this car model over this one. What is that saying about me?
Right.
And there is some influence of going, no, this is who I am, and it kind of directs your purchase decision. But at the end of the day, your actions are really forming that perception and what we our internal narrative. It's fortifying what we think and how we see ourselves.
And these aren't, again, these aren't like hard absolutes too, because I know like there's always like there's still within each group. Right, there's still variances. There's diehards. There's people that are kind of more in the same. So you can be in a group. Like for instance, I just I bought another motorcycle and sold my old one, and I had a Kawasaki before that, and now I've got a Harley Davidson, and so now I'm kind of that part of that Harley crowd, that Harley family, right? And there's people in that group. That in that community that are so like anti any other brand of motorcycle, right? And then there's others that are like, I can respect if you want to ride a Honda or you want to ride a Triumph or an Indian motorcycle, more power to you. I personally got my latest motorcycle is a Harley and I love it, right? But there's other Harley riders that would be like completely dissing any rider that's riding anything but a Harley. And there's those diehards, right? They're just like with politics, like just because if Tesla represents one particular political aisle, that doesn't mean that all Tesla drivers are on that side of the fence, right? And so, but we as a group, the group mentality, the herd mentality, right? Where it's so easy for us to get sucked into that mentality that it's in the us and them, right? Mm-hmm. That everybody that drives this or everybody that purchases this brand believes this is what they support, this is what they are. And in the end, it's like, guys, it's still consumerism, right? You buy a brand, you buy a model, whatever it is, for various reasons, right? I remember when you were looking at buying your latest car, Reilly, and you were researching and test driving various makes and models. Yep. You weren't just going, well, it's got to be this because this is who I drive. This is the brands I buy. I go to Costco. I love Coke. You love Disney and Apple. Therefore, it's got to be this is your make and model to represent you. You purchase something based on the research and how it was going to best suit your family and your needs and your price point and all those things, right? And you ended up landing on a brand of car, and you're happy with it. And does that driving around, does that help maybe organize other brands that might fit that? Yes, but it might not. Right. And so but the mentality, our social, the way we're wired, the way our brains are wired, we stick to our groups, right? And we stick to, and so it's so much of it can fall into that.
Right. And even like, as you may know, Scott and I are both heavy Apple users, and even we recently got the Remarkable tablets, and even that, I felt like I was kind of cheating on Apple a little, where I'm like, I'm not getting an iPad. I'm getting this third party kind of independent, solution to this very specific need. But that's what they did so right, is that they honed in so much on a specific type of person and situation for the product, and that solved my issues. And really, I'm so satisfied with it.
Yeah, for a tablet, they bucked the tradition of all the other tablets out there.
Like giant phone.
Right, that I can do everything on it. You're like, no, this is actually the Remarkable tablet is there's no internet connection. You're hooked to Wi-Fi only to sync files from your computer if you need to, or to share a PDF. But
no clock.
If you can't like get distracted. So for those of us like to be productive and want distraction free, it's such a unique product that it feels a different niche than other tablets out there.
Yeah, kind of our innate need to belong and to be part of something then now goes, okay, in this situation, now I identify with the Remarkable group. So then if Remarkable comes out with another product or something, I will be more keen to go, oh, I'll give it a look. I'll actually pay attention to it and go, okay, that does actually align with me and who I am. And that's what even Scott was saying with the car. I never considered Volvo before. And then we were test driving cars, trying all these different ones, Jaguar, trying all these different like brands, and just none of them were clicking. And then we happened to sit in a Volvo, take it for a drive. I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's actually like drives really awesome.
And for the needs for you and your family, right?
Super safe. The thing was like 50% heavier than the Ford Explorer we had before. So the thing is like, it's like a boulder moving, super safe. And then the technology and stuff inside of it, I'm like, this is where actually I could see where Tesla used a lot of the kind of inspiration from Volvo, because Volvo is just like, it's so Swedish in everything it does, the design and the aesthetic of a lot of things, it makes a lot of sense. And, since then, now I'm more part of Volvo, where I'm like, okay, I'll entertain if they come out with a new model, or like their sister brand with Polestar, which I've always liked, but their design language, it crosses over. So Polestar shares a lot of the same attributes. And, but it's interesting to see, even in our own personal lives, as you go from brand to brand, and you're kind of going from these tribes. And like Scott was saying, it's a spectrum. It's not like Scott has like a Harley Davidson tattoo now and hanging up the Harley Davidson calendar in his garage.
No. Yeah, no. But yeah, I mean, and that's one thing. It's like, just because you buy into a brand doesn't mean you have to buy into everything about that. But a lot of people do, again, because it's like, we like our communities. We like things that birds of a feather flock together. Right. And so when it comes to consumers and brands that we gravitate towards too, it's part of our wiring.
Yeah. And so then it's like, okay, as a small business, you're like, I sell, product X, Y, and Z, or I sell these services. How does someone what's the social psychology behind my product or service? How do I connect?
How do you tap into? How do you make use of this, or lean into this fact that it's an us or them mentality when it comes to brands?
There's some very obvious answers to this, and some industries do have more of an advantage over others. Like alcohol brands, whether it's a local brewery or something like that, they naturally, alcohol is a social lubricant and social activity.
And so the basis of a book and a podcast. I'm not sorry.
An amazing book called Brandy. And so it's you naturally have social interactions, social experiences around alcohol, whether you own a bar or a speakeasy or a brewery. It's like you have social interactions interwoven in that. Even wineries, it's like when someone does come to a winery for a tasting, it's a social experience. There's something behind it. Unless someone's sitting there drinking them by themselves, that's a different situation. But it's really, you have social kind of baked in there. So the social psychology behind that, it's there, where it's like you have people coming for a specific purpose, and they're with, like Scott said, birds of a feather. So it's like, okay, now how does your brand latch onto that?
Yeah. Like, for instance, if, when a small brand can understand their consumer, understand their customer and what else their customer likes, and then be able to find ways to bring some of that element in, right? Whether it is even like some small business, maybe it's a pop-up, maybe it's a thing that you're going to open late one evening and announce it in your store, right? You're going to be having this, and that the same people that might come into your store would definitely maybe show up for this. That's where you can lean into other brands or lean into other collaborations, where you're farming from the same pond of people to bring them into and introduce them into your brand, or vice versa. So collaborations are a big thing nowadays. I know that a lot with a lot of smaller businesses, right? And finding ways to connect with the same group of people that another popular brand is able to do that.
Yeah, I always like to refer to it as like cross-pollination. Is that if you can have your brand collaborate with a similar, like Coke and Costco, is that you create these little areas where someone can easily leapfrog from one to the next, and it's this cross-pollination of, yes, brand association, framing, and also kinship of going, oh, I belong to this brand Y, going over to brand X actually makes sense. Right. And then it may allow them, it opens them up with kind of the trustworthiness and being able to go, oh yeah, I actually do like that brand now.
Yeah.
And again, social stuff can be baked into a lot of these, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's something like that, where you do have social engagement. And it makes me think that even like experiences that we do remember and that we do treasure, there has to be a line of social that's going through it. Is that even you think of going to a concert, it's like going to a concert by yourself is like, okay, that's one thing. But going to a concert where the music is, you're enjoying it with a friend, it's totally different, because you're both engaging on this thing. And that's what they found too, is that music, that's why even if you did go to a concert by yourself or like a rave, the music puts everyone in the same kind of like frequency.
Yeah.
It sounds super woo-woo, but it's proven is that this is why worship and music both create this phenomenon where people actually there's a bonding aspect, and you release serotonin and all this stuff where people are bonding during like a live concert, is that
Yeah.
everyone's put in the same kind of trance due to the music, the rhythm, all these things, and they're experiencing the same thing. So even if you did go by yourself, it's still this social experience, and you're bonding with the people. There's kinship there.
The biggest mistake as a small business you can make, and we've said this before, is when in your mind, like who are you trying to reach, right? And if the answer is everybody, then you really are setting yourself up to fail. Everything can't be a broad sawed-off shotgun blast that literally is just spraying the wall. You've got to like make the barrel longer. You've got to zero in and have a shorter blast and focus. That focus is what's going to allow you to fall into a specific group, and that will not guarantee you. You're setting yourself up more to have that emotional connection the audience will have with you, and inclusion in the group, right?
Yeah.
The group of the consumer, because you are trying to speak more specifically to them.
Yeah. That's like what Seth Godin says, where it's people like us do things like this. And every social group we're part of, it's that same thing over and over. People like us do things like this. And really, it's like that behavior then leads up to your brand. And whether you're like, oh man, I can't become a Coke or I can't become a Pepsi. It's like, well, that's not the point. The point is to do what Dr. Pepper or what Remarkable did, where like Scott's saying, is like you hone in and you niche down so accurately and with precision that then you do get the people in the middle who associate with what you're building, with what you're doing that's so distinct and it stands out that you can't be mistaken as the other people. You can't be mistaken. A Remarkable can't be mistaken as an iPad. It's almost the antithesis of an iPad. It's like bringing things back to paper, but in a digital context.
Well, like for instance, if we're talking about brand wars, let's talk about gaming platforms, Xbox versus PlayStation, right? Xbox is Microsoft owned. So I don't have numbers in front of me, but I've always been an Apple. I've been anti-Microsoft because I've always been on Apple. One time I had to get a PC for my son in school, and he had to have a PC laptop, and just even getting in there, trying to set it up and unbox everything. I was so I didn't like it at all. It was a weird experience, but that when I'm a gamer, so naturally, between Xbox or PlayStation, I went to PlayStation, and I'm all Sony. That's everything else. So, and I know for you, you're an Apple guy. You've always been an Apple guy, but you also grew up with Xbox, and you have a PlayStation now, PS5, but you also have that history with Xbox where you talk about games that are Xbox only or Microsoft.
Yeah.
I never played those, right? So there's those camps. So in between, it's like that's an example for me where if you are PC or Microsoft and Apple, that can bleed into if you get into gaming right now, and if you've never bought a console and now you decide you're going to get a console, are you going to stay? Yeah. Is your affinity, is your brand experience with Microsoft good enough and strong enough that it's like, well, it's a no-brainer. Microsoft's behind Xbox. I'm going to get an Xbox. Or I'm an Apple guy. And therefore, for me personally, I'm a fervent Apple guy, and I'm anti-Microsoft. So therefore, I'm going to get Sony a PlayStation because it's not a Microsoft product.
Well, and it's funny because you go, okay, then what's the crossover? And Sony's actually one of the only very few third-party brands that Apple has on its website, where they'll have pictures of the Sony controllers because it links up with the iPad and yada yada yada. But but
Seinfeld reference there.
But Sony and Apple, they're both very, very design focused. They're aesthetic. There is this like common design language between the brands where you can tell, like culturally, where its roots are, is very design focused and very intentional about interface and things like that.
Yeah.
And Microsoft, on the other hand, isn't much like that. They show that with the PCs, they show that with Xbox, and finally Xbox. They did a great job with the controller design that won awards and whatnot, but it still didn't have the finesse that PlayStation always has had.
Right.
And I feel like PlayStation has always pushed technological boundaries on things.
Yeah.
I feel like they've always been like advancing faster. But even switching from Xbox to PlayStation, it was like coming into the Apple universe of like, oh my gosh, the home screen, everything's just so much better thought out.
And how much of our filter for brands is preset based on our little circles? For instance, you mentioned Xbox One game control. That brought to mind one of the reasons back when Halo parties was big, right? And I remember joining up with some friends, and they had Xboxes, and getting to play in Halo, but I never liked the feel of the Xbox controller, and I always preferred the feel. Now, is that a mental? Because when you're like they won awards, I'm like, really? That was the one part of an Xbox I hated was the controller. So did I already go in jaded?
Well, yeah, because PlayStation is always the claw, and then Xbox went opposite, where it was huge, it was like massive, much
little
more
paperback book in my hand. And then, it was weird. You're right.
And then they evolved it over time. But and then you look at the PS5 controllers, that it's very similar to an Xbox controller now, and it's because that the ergonomics of it, and they're upgrading the technology with the kinetic and everything. So it's like they need more room. But I think the clawness of PlayStation wasn't like people liked it because they were fond of it, but then it kind of like turned more into.
I think when we get into brand groups, if there was so many different ways you could do quote unquote blind taste tests, where you could write Coke versus Pepsi, right? Blind taste test. But if it came down to other brands, right? It could be a razor. It could be a deodorant. It could be whatever, right? How much stigma plays into the brand versus the product?
And I think this is part of why these brands do that, though. I think it's why they try to make their interaction and engagement different than the opponents. Like even like with Apple, you have like the command versus control button. Like it's a totally, when you put a PC person on an Apple, they're like, they don't know how to function.
Same thing with like buttons on Xbox and controllers, like A, B, they have different,
it's a different language.
It's not, why can't they just use the same X and circle and square and triangle? But no, it's different on Xbox and they call it different. So, and
we've talked about
different
that before,
terminologies
where it's like, the nomenclature and designing that because different cultures, different people speak different languages, and language is the shortcut to behavior. So being able to go, okay, no, we don't call this control, we call it command, right? And that's not X button, that's the square or whatever. Yeah. And you have this transition, or even like Starbucks, oh, we don't call it a small, that's a tall. And you have the rewiring through language, where then that creates more of that kinship and more of that tribe of going, no, that's how we speak around here. That's not, even you go to certain hotels where they have like concierge and they have all these things where it's like they use different wording for really the same services and same
if you have a hotel and you call them by rooms, this is our deluxe room versus this is our deluxe suite.
Yeah.
How you frame something,
experience.
Right? And we've talked about this before, framing, namature, all these things lay into it. If anything, like we got into like the blind taste test and everything, to me, it just reminds me of how much power is in brand.
Yeah.
Because when you put brand, when you encase brand around the product, it has so much power when it comes to us, them, brand associations, cross brand, demographics, things like that. There's so much power behind it, because if it just came down to blind taste tests, right, blind usage or whatever it is, right, you'd be surprised where you might fall.
Yeah.
In what aisle or what side of the fence when it comes to brands, if you strip them of their brand and just literally evaluate the product or service based on the product or service.
Again, going back, it's like the social psychology behind this is huge, because we are social creatures. And so when we make these choices, when we subscribe to a brand, when we make purchases or whatever it is, like that does say something about us, and it says something about who we're with. And so keeping that in mind as consumers, but also as a business, being able to go, okay, when someone does purchase my product or my service, what does that tell them about themselves? And what are they seeing when they look around, right? Because even if I go into a restaurant and you look around, you see the people in there, how are they dressed? How are they acting? Is that you?
Yeah.
Does that match who you are or who you're aspiring to be? And if you go in somewhere, like I've walked into bars before where it's like, I'll look around and be like, man, these people are not my crowd. Like they're not, and I'll just walk out, because it's like it doesn't match my vibe. Where I'm like, I don't want to be these people. I don't want to associate with these people. Like it's not my scene.
As you may not be able to introspect your own business and your own brand, your own customers, but you probably know who your strongest competition is. And if you start looking at them and going, who shops with them? What do I know about them? What can I say about them? and then I'm going to go with someone else, because it isn't necessarily about stealing. It's about being distinct from your competitor. So then that means if a certain type is all gravitating to this competitor, then can you then draw the people that aren't there? Right.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to steal away the same people, that's a harder task. But if you can be distinctive and you find who are they not reaching, who's that brand not reaching,
point, yeah.
no one's reaching them. That's who I'm going to go after, right? And that's kind of like with Remarkable. They weren't trying to compete with it. They went, who's the iPad not, right? It offers all. It's another smart. It's just a bigger version of your smartphone, of your iPhone, right? It's the iPad. So then, what can we do? How can we? What are some people that aren't buying an iPad? Why? Why not?
Yeah.
And then how can we lean into that and capitalize on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of like jujitsu of taking the underserved, kind of ignored market and then making that your strength. Like what they're wanting.
Their weaknesses are your strength. Yeah, exactly. So
that's powerful.
Well, I think I'm going to go have a prune juice soda. I mean, a Dr. Pepper and mull on this. So
thank you for listening, and until next time.
Cheers.